Hello, everybody. Catchy1383 with Catchy Gaming, coming with a video of my second viewing of the Mario Brothers movie. So let me start with adding some corrections from my previous video. So I said it was a little weird that the Toads have halberds and helmets, but at the beginning of Super Mario Galaxy, they have spears and shields. So yeah, that's a thing. Second, I think I called it a bonsai bill. Bowser calls it a bomber bill. And I did look it up, and they're the same from the looks of it, but let's just go with what Bowser said in the movie and stick with bomber. And lastly, I said Godzilla in 1997. It's 1998. Yes, I was off by a year, and I'm pretty sure everybody knew what I meant, but we're just going to make that clarification. Or correction in this case. So, for my second viewing, I'll admit I enjoyed myself a lot more than I did the first one. And I think that's because I wasn't watching it and analyzing and looking for stuff. Not, or at least not to the same degree. And that's probably why I liked it a lot more. And I also got a better gauge of what general audiences like. My first viewing was in the middle of the day, so the middle of a school day, which I did on purpose so there wouldn't be as many kids. And this one was a mostly packed theater, except for maybe one or two single seats, one of them being filled by me. And I can definitely say that, yes, this movie was well loved by the younger audiences and some even the adults. I mean, there's still some parts of it I do stand by, like Bowser using a giant flying island instead of multiple airships. I mean, he uses airships throughout the series, all the way back to Mario 3. And if you go to Super Mario Galaxy, has a fleet of ships. You got a new Super Mario Brothers Wii U, has a fleet of airships. Mario Odyssey, he starts off on an airship with sails and not propellers, and there's multiple other airships, including the one Mario uses. I'm not going to go into more detail than that. It's not really necessary. It still worked. The island looked great, to be honest. So if you have not seen this movie and you have kids, they'll more than likely love this movie. There is one bit of sort of disappointing part is that I didn't hear more small chuckles from maybe the older audience, and I'm guessing a lot of people just aren't as familiar with Mario, maybe have forgotten, or just because it's a kids movie, they brought their kids and never were ever familiar with Mario as I am. Like the line where the Toads are messing with Mario and said, maybe our princess is in another castle. Nothing from anybody. Not even a slight chuckle or a chortle or anything. And in some cases, it's clear that some people didn't recognize music from the games either. And I guess anybody 15 years or younger probably aren't going to know a lot of this either. And I guess you could apply the same logic to a lot of the adults who never really played Mario, or any Mario game for that matter. There was one guy next to me, he laughed at something, and no one else did, and there wasn't a joke or even anything happening in the background, and he just laughed. It was odd, and he kept doing it throughout the movie when there was no jokes and no one else was laughing. I know humor is subjective, but there's actually a point when you have to question somebody's sense of humor, and this is one of them. And I guess I need to say this. I did look up one of the critics. I wouldn't even call her a critic. She's just a windbag harpy, and she even sounds like one. If you listen to her, she is just grating to listen to. She clearly wasn't paying attention to the movie at all. That being Grace Randolph. And to be honest, I wouldn't listen to any mainstream critic at all. In fact, you should probably just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and go see the movie for yourself. But I'm advising you, yes, this movie will be fun. It's enjoyable, especially if you're not going in with a critical mindset looking for every little minute detail. And if you're not even familiar with the Mario universe as I am, you're probably definitely gonna love it. So after watching this movie for a second time, I was sort of wondering how long have various studios been knocking on Nintendo's door in order to get a hold of licenses for coveted Nintendo characters. Now, it was several years ago that Nintendo said they want to expand into different forms of entertainment, not just video games, and they clearly met that goal with this movie. And they've already struck a deal with another one to start the Legend of Zelda movie. It's in pre-production right now. And it makes me wonder if there's a swarm of hungry cheap cheaps in the form of studios circling Nintendo hoping to get a hold of one of those elusive licenses for one of their beloved characters, especially after the success of this particular movie. Then there's other companies to consider. Now that Nintendo has actually had a very successful movie, not just Sonic, but even more, maybe it'll embolden some companies to license out their video game characters. I have no doubt we'll probably see a couple trend chasers here and there. One that comes to mind in particular is probably Spyro, maybe Crash Bandicoot. And then there's Banjo and Kazooie, but Mega Man also stands out to me. And let's face it, Mario set the bar high in comparison to other video game movies, with all of them barely being watchable in some cases, and actually in others not even watchable, to being maybe somewhat serviceable. I mean, what comes to mind is the Mortal Kombat movies, and then the Resident Evil movies, which honestly, after the first one, were just terrible. And I'm kind of hoping this doesn't happen to a large degree. That way, the market isn't flooded with really bad video game movies. I mean, there's no shortage as is right now, but we don't need to be adding on to that in any shape or form. It already took 30 years for Nintendo just to put out a new movie. 30 years because of how bad the experience was with the first one. Could you imagine if they went with somebody different than Leitmotiv? Let's say they actually chose an animation route and let's say got a Disney sort of partnership and we had a Disney Renaissance version of Mario Brothers. Could you imagine that? How awesome that would have been back in the 90s to get an animated movie made by the Disney animators in the 90s. Granted, I don't think that deal would ever happen, and it's probably a good thing that it didn't, considering how Disney likes to sink its claws into everything. And it's probably a smart move on Nintendo if Disney did make an offer. And I want to go back to maybe a slightly previous point in that I think Sonic could also be a character that is still viable, especially after Jim Carrey retired after playing Dr. Robotnik. It's a perfect excuse to do a soft reboot. Just do something similar to Spider-Man Homecoming. No origin story, just a brand new story that's already taken place with these characters that have been established. I don't want to say let's hope, because according to a very cynical Luma, hope is an illusion. Let's just say time will tell whether or not Nintendo can turn this into a cinematic universe and maybe bring some actual entertainment to the movies again. Unless there's a repeated history of terrible movies, yes, I will probably try and see as many of them as possible, if not all of them. And I'm pretty sure I am not alone in that opinion. And in case of Nintendo's overprotective nature of its IPs, I think that's actually going to serve them well, especially if they force studios to adhere to a contract or basic storyline characteristics of said IPs. Anyways, if you made it this far, thank you for watching and have a good one.